Welcome, everyone. This is Lisa Presley. I'm the District Executive of the Heartland District, and tonight I'm presenting on congregations and safety. I've been a UU minister for over 20 years, a lifelong UU, and I've done almost anything that there is to do in congregational life as a layperson before I went into ministry. And one of the things that gives me expertise in this particular realm is that I also served as a police chaplain in Southfield, Michigan for about a decade and became very interested in safety issues through that, as well as through my partner who does a lot of safety and rescue coordination and that stuff. So anyway, it's my delight to be with you tonight and to share the information that I have. And if you have comments or questions, feel free to chime in at any particular time.
Conference is being recorded.
But as we go, what I'd like to do is to make sure that we start always with a chalice lighting. This one is by friend and colleague Wayne Arneson, and many of you might be familiar with it. It's number 698 in our hymnal. Wayne wrote, "Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone." And the reason why I share this reading is that much of what happens in our congregations and around safety make us feel as if we are alone sometimes. And so thereby I want you to know that you are not alone and that your district and region are here to help you as much as we can. And so with that, we will launch into congregational safety. And one of the things, before I actually launch into the slides, I want to say is that I'm going to be doing a large brain dump tonight as far as all the things a perfect congregation would do. But we know that every congregation who does this needs to begin somewhere. So I always remind people of the joke of how is it that a chihuahua eats an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. And so as you're listening to all this information I'm doing there, one of the things for you to pay attention to is what are the things that you could begin to do right now that might make a difference in safety in your congregation, and which are the things that might take a little bit longer because you have to get more buy-in or get some money to do things of that. But to remember that no one does it all. I'm just talking about all the things that would be good to think about doing, and you'll have to tailor it to your own situation. But the main reason why we do safety in our congregations is that people come to us for a variety of reasons. You know, they come because they're seeking community or religious freedom or a home or a place to raise their children. And yet underneath all of this, they come also with the expectation that we will do all within our power and control to make sure that they are safe, that nothing untoward happens to them there. It takes a lot of courage to come to a congregation, especially the first time. And so our job is to make sure that they are welcome and that they are well provided for. When thinking about safety, there are three different areas of focus: people, places, and things. All three of those are things that we should be thinking about as we're looking at safety. And there are also two modifiers. I like to think of this as a matrix or a grid. And the two modifiers are natural and human-created situations. We're seeing a lot with Hurricane Sandy and its aftermath as far as what the natural world can create. And then there are those that we can all imagine about the human-created. But so for any event that we're dealing with, you need to look at what are the impacts on those three areas of congregational life, the people, places, and things. And this is not only when something immediately happens, but what are the fallout factors, or what are the things down the road that we might need to look at? And for example, I have here a storm. If the tree falls on the building, that creates a hole in the roof, and that is a problem for the place. But it's also a danger for people who might be rushing in and find themselves slipping and sliding on rain that's coming in, and then the leak could destroy a computer system or where all your records are. And so something like a tree, which looks to be just about a place, can also have those spin-out impacts on things and people. The same is true for a medical issue that might happen in your congregation. It might traumatize some members. And if you don't have records or something nearby that helps you know who to contact, it can also create a crisis for the people around that person and your community as a whole. So it's good to think about not only the initial event, but what will happen after that. And of course, if you grew up in the era that I did, you know that that Smokey the Bear always told you that the best thing to do was to be prepared, as did the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and many other groups. And that always is the best practice, to make sure that you do what you can in advance to mitigate any difficulties and dangers down the road. Now, all our planning won't keep everyone safe, and it won't prevent things from happening, but it can make the impact of those much less. And so one of the things that I strongly encourage is that you create policies and procedures that reflect all three levels, the people, place, and things, and looking at that, and that you share this information widely, both with the members in your congregation, but also with any groups that rent your building. Too often, renters have no idea what to do if something happens when they're in the building. And so sharing that information as part of your rental agreement and your work with them can be very beneficial for them as well. Now, at the end of the slides and on your PDF, you'll see that there are some actual websites listed for these various resources. But some of the resources that you can have are make advantage of the UUA website or your district and regional staff. Church Mutual Insurance Company helps not only those who are clients, and they do insure, I think, well over 50% of our UU congregations, but their website is a wealth of information even if you don't happen to be one of their clients. They have pages of safety resources about playgrounds, about keeping your buildings, how to do an assessment of the safety level in your congregation, both as far as the people, places, and things. And so you might want to just check them out. Most of our communities will have community policing officers who are there as resources to help you look at what risks they might be able to identify and to work with you to mitigate against those. The federal government's ready.gov website is a good thing that provides you with information about how to think about disasters and planning, and you might want to use that to work with your congregation members on that too. Most of our communities also will have a disaster management group, and you can find out information about what they recommend and how you can gain and share information. And your own insurance company might also have resources. So let me now move to some of the people issues. And again, if you have questions as we're going along, please feel free. You would just, to ask them, you would just, if you're muted, hit *6 to unmute yourself. And I'm always willing to stop for questions. I might tell you the answers around the corner, but I'd love to know if you have questions other than what I'm just saying. To protect our people medically, one of the things that, well, here's several different suggestions on the slides. One of them is to train the key leaders in first aid annually. All your paid staff members should be required to have first aid training and CPR training so that they know how to respond. And you might want to think about hosting a training at your congregation so more people can be trained in those arts. And you might want to look at having this as part of a board retreat or something as well. I also recommend that congregations purchase an AED, a defibrillator, and that you get your people trained annually. Up in my neck of the woods where I live, there was a story in the paper just about a year ago where a woman whose husband had died because of a heart attack in church decided that her gift to the congregation would be to provide them with an AED. And they put it in, and the week after they installed it, they were able to save the life of another visitor to their congregation who had a heart attack. I know that our Bloomington, Indiana congregation has one of these in place and even got a grant to help pay for it through one of their community organizations. So you can think cleverly about how you might do this. They can be a pricey item because they're about $1,200 to $1,500, but it's a level of protection that can be very useful to congregation members. It should go without saying that you should have a full first aid kit, But what a lot of places don't have is signs as to where that kit is located. You want to make sure that it's located someplace that renters to your building can have access to, and that it's not locked away in someone's office where they can't get that. You might want to think about including things like diabetes glucose tablets or other things for easily identified medical situations. Of course, you don't want to be dispensing medications, but something like glucose tablets can be very helpful in case of, with the increasing number of cases of diabetes in our country. So you might want to think about having 2 or 3 different first aid kits, one where the religious education program is and one that's where the main body of the church is. But best thing, make sure that there are signs and that they're in unlocked locations. You also want to make sure that you check them periodically to make sure that they're filled, that the resources have been used, and that there's no expired materials in them. Another one of those things that we often don't think about is posting the congregation's address inside the building in a prominent location. Many of us know how to get to our churches, but a lot of us don't remember what the actual street address is. And for many of our renter groups, that's also true. They won't know what the address is. So you want to make sure that you post it indoors so that they can explain, especially if someone's calling on their cell phone where a GPS tracking might not be working, so that the first responders will know where it is. And you might want to consider having a phone available for 911 calls, for emergency calls, in case your area doesn't have good cell coverage or something happens to cell transmission, or there are actually, I believe, still 2 or 3 people in the world who don't own cell phones. So you might want to have one, and you can always program these phones so that they can't make long-distance calls, so that you're not plagued with calls to the other side of the world by having this available. But you might want to think about doing that. It's always a good idea to know who the medical people are in your congregation, just in case something happens. So nurses, doctors, emergency EMTs, and other people like that, to know who they are so you know who you can turn to. And you want to make sure that you brief your leaders on where they can find all these materials, where that list of medical people are, where the first aid kit is annually. One of the things that I often do is at a board retreat after new board members are elected and at an all-committee chair meeting is to take a tour of the building and show everybody where the furnace room is, where all the fire extinguishers are, and where the first aid kits are, and other things that they may need to know in order to keep themselves and the congregation safe. One thing that's also a good people thing is to make sure that you ask your members to fill out emergency medical contact files. Not that they necessarily give you the permission to make decisions for them medically, but you know who to contact in case something happens to one of your members. This is especially helpful for people who live alone and who may have family members who are away from the area. Having in a locked file somewhere in the church how to get in touch with next of kin can be very useful for a lot of reasons. And so it's something that you can ask your members to do and to update on a regular basis.
Lisa, this is Carol. Yes. Do you have a form for this emergency contact information?
I believe I probably do, Carol, and I can send that to you.
That would be awesome. I am thinking that at least for members of our congregation who are willing to provide this to us, I'm trying to figure out how to get that information. I mean, we have a bunch of members, so.
Yeah, you have a bunch of members, and depending on whether or not you have a database system you want to enter it into, that's fine. Or what I've always done is just put them alphabetically in a file folder in a cabinet.
Okay.
Because it's not information that you need every day, but that way you can know, how to get to it quickly when you need it. And this is, of course, an optional thing for congregation members.
Great. I'd like to have that form. Thanks very much.
Great. Let's look at safety guidelines then as far as people. One of the things that we always recommend is that every congregation create policies and procedures for becoming a safe congregation. By safe congregation, we mean a place that looks at how do we help protect our children and vulnerable adults. There are a number of webinars that you can find online that deal with safe congregations, but these are policies around screening your religious education workers, making sure there's 2 people in the room, windows indoors, and all that sort of thing. And that's a whole other topic for another webinar. But making sure you have those policies is always a good thing. I next show here sexual offenders. One of the things that we're realizing is that there are more and more people who are registered under sexual offender registries who are attending our UU churches. For many of these people, their sexual offense might be something as having a girlfriend or boyfriend who is, a month younger than they should be according to statutes as far as the age gap, where it might be a 1 or 2 year difference, but someone's just on the other side of the line. Or it might be that someone was picked up because they were having a relationship with someone of same sex. And so not all sex offenders are alike. Some are people who may be a danger to your congregation, but others will probably never be a danger to your congregation. And so the main thing to do is don't presume it doesn't happen in your congregation. Just in the Heartland district, I recently heard about one congregation who discovered just sort of accidentally that there were 2 sexual offenders, registered offenders in their congregation that they didn't know about. And another one had a visitor from the outside just come, and they were able to discover this about them. So you might need to think about how do you actually look at making welcome people and also safeguarding your members. What happens in some situations is you might insist that they never be alone in the congregation, that there's always a buddy who's working with them, a designated companion, and that you can ask for people to disclose this information regularly, either through your materials or notes in your newsletter, and have them do it in a way to minister to others that helps out. And so it's really about both safeguarding the congregation but also safeguarding that member. Because if someone is on the registry and they haven't come forward, they might be more likely to get, they might get false complaints against them as well, or people who are very concerned about them when they may or may not pose a danger. So finding ways that you can help ensure their safety and the safety of your people by having good policies in place beforehand is a good thing to have.
Lisa, this is Diana Hughes from All Souls in Kansas City. Do you have language that we could use in a newsletter for that? I don't know how to put it tactfully and gracefully and helping people.
Right, and I don't right at the moment, Diana, but I can look for that and get it to you. You may also find that one of the places that you should always contact when you're talking about this would be your insurance company to find out what it is they would recommend as far as policies as well. We, of course, don't give any legal advice, but so I can't tell you what is the best way to do that. But I can work on that and make sure I get something to you.
Thank you.
Another issue are travel guidelines. Do you have policies in place and that govern the safety of your people when they are driving others, whether this be young people on trips or chaperones for events, or just helping drive people to and from doctor's appointments or whatever? You might want to look to make sure that you have guidelines and that they would include things like your drivers have valid driver's licenses. When I was a police chaplain, one of our chaplains turned out to be driving to all sorts of things without having a valid license. And that was pretty embarrassing for the police department. But, we need to also make sure that we're not creating any difficulties for our people by having unlicensed drivers. Stranger danger is probably one of the things that raises the most fear in our congregations, that somehow somebody will come in from the outside and do something that creates difficulties for our people. Most of us remember the shootings that happened in our Knoxville congregation just a few years ago and worry about what might be, how do we protect ourselves from that. But I want to let you know that these, although it's our biggest fear often, it is very relatively rare that these kind of incidents happen. And just like in everything else, it's the awareness and the preparedness that help us know what to do with things. Some of the guidelines that you might want to look at for internal stranger danger is that you don't have anyone working with your children who has not been at the congregation for at least 6 months, or better yet, a year at your congregation, and that you also do background checks as well. You want to make sure that you create a response plan too. So one of the things that you can do is you can train your greeters and ushers and teachers and staff about how to be more aware of what's going on around them. If there's someone who comes in who looks like they might be carrying something, just, there are ways to train them to strike up conversations as well. You want to make sure that you have point people who are on duty each week. So it might be a board member or two whose job it is just sort of to be looking out for things that happen around the congregation. The trick is to be curious about who is coming in and what's going on, but not be paranoid about it. I remember in the aftermath of the Knoxville shootings, I went down there as part of our UU trauma response ministry and worked with the people. And one of the stories that I heard was that shortly after the shooting there, they started wondering about whether or not they should get a metal detector. And then they realized that they would have to figure out the placement of that metal detector. Would it go before or after the welcome table? And they realized sort of the ludicrous question that posed, and realized they did not want to be a congregation that lived with that much fear. That if they had done that, then the shooter would have truly won the day there. Yes, he did take lives, and yes, there were many people who were impacted by that. But they realized that if they really were going to stand on the side of love, as the banner in front of their church said, then they needed to not just expect the next disaster, but to live in a way that it was where they were curious, but not paranoid about what might happen. So those are sort of some of the human-created things. There's also, I want to talk about for people the hazard prevention. One of the things that as an interim minister I always used to do when I went to a congregation was to do a walk around the building as if I'd never been there before, which I hadn't, but to look at how is it that the property might be a danger to the members in the congregation. So one of the things that I would encourage you to do is to go look at your buildings or get a neighboring congregation to come and look at your building with new eyes. What are the things that we're used to and it's always been like that other people might see that will help us make our buildings more safe? Our entryway, is there good lighting, for example, or what other things there are? I remember in one congregation I served, they had a lot of glass windows. And for a number of years, they were the favorite targets of children with BB guns. And they had didn't really notice anymore that 14 of the windows in their courtyard had bullet holes in them from these BB guns. And as a new person to that building, I just sort of looked at these and I immediately wondered what's going on here and how safe would I be? But to them, it was just part of their lore. So that was where my new eyes could show them things that were different. So you want to make sure that in your building and the landscaping and how it works, that you're prepared for weather things, to make sure that snow and ice and flooding impacts your building to the least amount there, that people aren't slipping and falling. You want to check your playground equipment for safety guidelines to see whether or not it's meeting current guidelines that might be in your jurisdiction. And again, I know the Church Mutual website has a whole brochure available for free on playground equipment and safety. Make sure that your parking lots and your building have great lighting for nighttime security. I don't know how many times I've visited congregations where at night the parking lots are almost in total darkness, and someone walking alone from the building could be easily prey for someone else, or they could just trip over hazards that are on the ground. I recommend that you form a buddy system when you leave the building after dark so that no one is there alone, and that you wait in your cars to make sure that everybody's car starts and the lights are on so that you don't leave someone stranded behind. Many of our congregations do have a system for repairs and maintenance, but not everyone knows who it is or how they can let people know of issues that are come up. So you want to make sure that you have a well-documented system that's readily transparent that people can go to find out how building repairs can be made, especially those that impact on safety. And you want to make sure that your renters of your buildings know that as well. And you also want to always review your insurance at least annually to make sure that there's enough insurance there to cover your building and your people. So you want to make sure that it covers replacement value of your building as much as possible, that it includes directors and officers insurance, as well as malpractice insurance for your religious professionals. The last slide on our people is for disaster response. All congregations really need to have evacuation and sheltering in plans. Evacuation for when the danger is inside the building and sheltering in for when the danger is outside the building. So you have to make sure that when you design your evacuation route that you have two different gathering locations. You should have a primary location where everyone is supposed to go to, but just in case there is something difficult about that position, it becomes unsafe for some reason, you want a secondary spot where everyone goes so that you make sure that you can find each other and make sure to take tally of who's there. You want to have people who are designated to help getting children and vulnerable adults and disabled persons out of your building. One of the hardest things when there's a disaster going on is to convince parents that they should leave their children alone and that there are other people who will take their children out of the space. In times of fire or other disasters, it might be very difficult if the parents all flock to the religious education part when you're trying to get the kids out because they can create quite a traffic jam. And so you have to, A, train your parents to not go after their children, but you can do that best by making sure that there are designated people who will help move out our youngest people. It may be that this is a role for the board or for a special group of people at the congregation, but you want to make sure that those people are designated. You want to post maps in every room, in every location to help people see how it is that they should get out of the building, and you should include on that at least two routes, again, in case the first route is blocked by the danger. And you want to do a drill at least once a year so that you have everyone practice this and make sure that you know how to do it. If we have plans but don't practice them, we often forget them. And so that's why it's very important to make sure that you do these drills at least once a year. The same is true for sheltering in. Make sure that you know what are the safest places in your congregation. And here you could probably have someone from the fire department come in and help you sort that out. Post those maps and create them, and have drills again at least once a year.
Lisa,
you may want to tie. Yes?
Sorry, this is Carol. I had a question. So you're indicating that we should have, for example, a fire drill, fire and earthquake drill once a year, and a tornado drill once a year for where we live.
Yes, or you could do one that, you do one first and then you do the other after. And I was just going to suggest that you could tie it to, like they tell you to change the batteries in your smoke alarms at that time change every year. You could do it where you have the, in the spring you have the going outside one, and in the fall you have the staying inside drill. So you could do it that way. But it's good to practice both of this so that people know where to go. I would say if you can only do one a year, probably the evacuation is much more crucial than the sheltering in, but they're both very important to a congregational life.
Thanks.
So let's now move on to the places categories of our safety. For building safety, again, you look for the obvious nuisances, both inside and outside. That's what I did when I was an interim minister going around. One thing that we've discovered is a much more recent thing that we need to pay attention to is potential copper theft. We have one of the largest growing claims for church insurance companies is the theft of air conditioning units and if there's exposed copper piping, because the copper resale market is so good these days. So think about where are your air conditioners? What kind of safety do you have around there? Is there lighting so that people, so that they're well lit so that people are less likely to take them? Again, it's making making it not as attractive to potential thieves.
Lisa, this
Yes.
is Amy from Flint. Also from personal experience, we have our air conditioning unit now on the roof, and you can also get a security system for your air conditioner.
Great. So I'm sorry that you had to learn that in Flint, but thanks for sharing that information. You want to consider whether or not you have a fire alarm system in your building, and if you do that, you want the phone, a phone with the address and the emergency numbers listed nearby. I believe that in almost every jurisdiction now, it's required to have a sprinkler system in the kitchen over your stove, and if it's not required, you still might want to think about establishing that. They are expensive, and yet the cost of savings might be much more than the cost of the installation of that. The fire extinguishers should be throughout your building in easily identified spaces, again, prominent signs, and they need to be checked annually to make sure that they're up to date. Many fire insurance companies or fire extinguisher companies will perform that kind of annual service for you for a nominal fee. If you have fireplaces in your building, you need to monitor the use and make sure that you have safety equipment nearby that people know how to use in order to deal with any errant fire. Make sure you have a screen, all that kind of thing. For the playground safety, again, checking to see if they're up to code, and make sure that you put some good cushioning material on the ground so that for the inevitable falls, there minimizes the damage. Again, make sure that your building has good lighting all around it. And you also want to make sure that your address is well posted on the outside of the building, big enough that emergency vehicles can see the sign, especially at night, even when there are trees that are fully populated, so that if you need them, they can come and find you. For the evacuation and sheltering in, you want to create those routes and maps. You want to do those drills. And you might also want to look at partnering with your local disaster recovery agency. One of the things that you can think about is whether or not you want to be a resource for your neighborhood. Do you wish to have a sheltering in program there? And I believe I talked more about that on the later slide. So that's sort of it for the place, is making sure that. Did anybody have any questions on place or people that we've already covered? Well, great. I'm glad you're asking them as they come along. Let's now look at things. One of the things that, yes?
One thing, when you're talking sheltering in, if you have a lockdown situation, a good thing to have in all of your classrooms would be just one of those 5-gallon buckets, plastic buckets. You could put your water in there, a shower curtain to put up around it, have toilet paper in there, and some other food items if they're going to be in there for an extended period of time.
Absolutely, thank you. I was thinking I talked more about the sheltering in on the slides, but I guess I didn't. Yes, you always want to, if you're looking at sheltering in, and especially if you're going to be a sheltering in site for your community, one of the things you do have to make sure is you have things like energy bars or special bars that are designed for long-term storage that can provide food as well as the water. When I moved out to California for a while, I bought one of those earthquake kits, and it did include that 5-gallon bucket. I chose not to get the one with the attachable toilet seat, but they do exist. And so you might want to think about that. You might want to think about what kind of blankets do you need and all of that, and make sure that you look at that stock at least once a year to make sure that none of it has expired. Thank you very much. That's a great addition. The things part of our congregational life, probably the biggest one is our data. I don't know how any of our congregations could operate these days without the computerized systems that we have in place that keep track of our members and our finances. And so what you need to do is you have to make sure that this is backed up off-site. I recommend cloud storage as one very easy way to do it. We've recently had fun here in the Heartland district in which our administrator's computer went on life support and then finally died in hospice care. And the good news is that we lost very little data because we had subscribed to a system that kept that backup happening in the background of our computers at all times. So we might have lost maybe half a day's worth of work at most, because the rest of it was just trickling out, and there are plans where they will encrypt the information right as it leaves your computer, so you don't have to worry about it being snagged in midair. But the data safety and off-site backups are a marvelous thing. You might even want to think for your financial system whether or not there's an online system that would allow you to have access when you need that. For your equipment, you always want to keep an inventory of what you have. I don't know how many of our congregations could actually tell at a moment's notice how many telephones they have, what brand they are, what computers do they have, how many TVs and VCRs, and their age and vintage and all of that. So it's always good to maintain an inventory with full details, with photographs of things. This would help in case of a break-in or damage to the building, a theft, all of that. So you make sure that you keep that, you keep it electronically, and you keep it off-site again. In many of our smaller congregations, but also in some of our larger ones, one of the whole issues is archives. Where are those files kept? Often the history of a congregation is scattered about in the homes of all the past presidents or the past chairs of the committees and all of this. And so one of the things we urge people to do is think about, for your important documents, at least scanning them and storing them again in the cloud with off-site backup that way, not in members' attics or basements. That way you have your history and you have all your financial records and all of that accessible to them, to you if anything were to happen. The bottom line always is redundancy. You would much rather have things in 2 or 3 places safely than in just one. And the good news is that with scanners these days, much of even the old information can be stored in a way that keeps us safe and allows us access to the materials that we need in order to keep our congregation safe. Then there is the big question about what role do you want to have in your community as far as safety. So far we've been talking mostly about how is it that you keep your member, your buildings, and your possessions safe. But then the other question is, do you wish to be a leader in your community as far as safety? So the question is, do you want to be a community shelter in times of emergencies? Most of our communities are always looking for places that can shelter people in. Excuse me. And so in that case, it would be making sure that you have access to water storage in this. I know that one of the congregations I serve, they just had a couple of extra garbage cans in which they put water and all these things and just kept them sealed in those. And so they were safe and easily portable should they need them. You might want to consider having a first aid kit also in your sheltering in supplies as well. So do you wish to be that, and do you wish to get to know your neighbors and let them know about that? Another question is whether or not you want to sponsor trainings on preparedness. You could bring in members of your own congregation and people from the outside to help them figure out how to do a disaster plan for their families. And you can help them also learn about first aid and other techniques that would help them in times of emergency. And there are lots of organizations that can help you do this, and there are many groups who will help you do the training for free. Similarly, can you support workshops on wills and estate matters for families? This is part of their disaster preparedness and helping them feel safe and well cared for. But more than even will you do this in the beginning is the question of how will you make sure, if you choose to do it, you will keep that commitment to disaster preparedness up. Often this is these plans and these ideas come about because there's 1 or 2 people in the congregation for whom it's one of their goals in life to help with preparedness. But then how do you pass that along so that when they can no longer do this, there are other people who are willing to step up and be part of to make sure that this is part of the legacy of your congregation. So just some final words on this is that, you need to be prepared. It can happen here, and it does happen here. Just looking at any of the news reports to see what's happening in New York City right now, you know that if, the Sandy storm we had lots of warning about, but there are other things that happen that can plunge us into darkness and into difficulties without much warning. Make sure that you create and review your policies, that you have them in a way that are accessible to people. You back up everything that you can as far as your financial and data world, and you train your people well. And you make sure that part of that training is letting them know where the first aid is and how to use the fire extinguishers and how they can help you make the congregation safe. You have redundant systems as much as possible, especially with the backups so that are automatic. It's now readily easy and available, and you make sure you take care of yourself. The last slide is the one that shows some of those, the URLs for various sites that can help you with the safety preparation. And know that we're always available here at the district and the region to help you look at these questions, but also if the undesired happens, we are here to help you figure out how to do a plan that helps you in the aftermath of difficulties and dangers. And one thing I forgot to mention was, you might want to think about how you have a telephone tree or other way of checking in on people when a disaster happens. One of the ideas that I've come up with in the past or heard congregations do is that they make a partnership with a congregation that's not in their geographic area. They would provide a phone number that any people could call in case of emergency, and that people could check in there. If it's someone within your own community, it might be that you're all experiencing the same difficulties, that people don't have the time when they're protecting and trying to secure their own home to then be calling everyone else. So partnering with the congregation across the district or region where they might be willing to be the ones to be the telephone tree people for you, or to help keep track of who you've heard from and how safe or what needs are, it can be a good way of making a lateral connection and also making sure that you have a good safety plan. And if you'd like to do that, we'd be willing to help connect you with the congregation that would be willing to partner with you in that kind of situation. I realize a lot of this has just been me talking to you about what I know about this, but now is the time if anybody has questions or any other comments that you might like to make or suggestions, please feel free to join in.
Lisa, this is
Yes.
Presley, and we've been actually working on this for about a year now. And one of the things that we do, you said, how do you make sure that this continues on? Well, we actually have had a committee for about a year now and have covered many of these things that you're talking about. But we put together a rotation of what we came to call community keepers on Sunday mornings, which is somebody who, after the service starts, we make sure every door is locked except the front door, and that person stays by the front door, watches who comes in, who goes out, checks the parking lot, and that way it came about because of the shootings. That way we know who, in other congregations, we know who comes into the building after the service has started, and we don't have people wandering around by our children in the Sunday schools. We don't have strangers just wandering around the building. We don't have to worry about coats being stolen, things like that. So that is one thing that we do, and it's been covered for months now on a regular basis each Sunday.
That's great. And another congregation had someone who was as a member, was a retired police officer. When they had some interesting letters being sent to the church. First of all, they did call the police to let them know about the strange mail they were getting. But this person would often on a Sunday morning just sort of sit in his car reading the newspaper in the parking lot when he was actually sort of flipping the pages, but doing a very good job of just keeping a casual eye out on things. So that's another thing to do. Thank you. That's a great suggestion.
Lisa, it's Diana Hughes again from Kansas City. And you had said that we could get people to help us train for DFib and CPR and that kind of thing for free? Where are who are those?
In some organizations you can. Well, sometimes the people who sell you the equipment will train you on it. The Red Cross might be looking for places to hold trainings that they might charge for people to do that, or you might have to pay a nominal fee. But if you host one of their trainings, you might be able to do that. So I would look around your community at who provides disaster recovery information and training, and see whether or not they would be willing to do a deal if you were to offer them a location.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa?
Yes.
This is Glenn Lawandos, Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Central Michigan.
Yes.
I have come across a website that is an excellent source of a safety manual and protection manual for congregations. It's online, and it is the website of the Jewish Anti-Defamation League. Although it's written from the standpoint of protecting Jewish institutions and synagogues, it's just an excellent, manual of step-by-step going through all of the things you've talked about plus others.
Great. That's a good thing to add to my resource list. Yes, and if you also just Google disaster preparedness, congregations or churches or religious organizations, you will find what other groups have done that might be online and available for you to copy from. And sometimes it's good to look at both your geographic region, but also others. Here in the Midwest, we're more likely to have tornadoes than earthquakes, but we do have earthquakes too. But so that we can learn. But we might find by looking at what preparedness happens for earthquakes, there are things that don't get mentioned in tornado packages that might be smart for us to think about anyway.
Lisa? This is Annie from Flint.
Yes.
Here in the state of Michigan, our Michigan State Police put on a training for churches on safety-related items. I don't know if they do that in other states or not, but at least congregations here in Michigan have that available to them.
Perfect. And as I said earlier, a lot of your community police departments will do that, or will know whether or not there are other levels of law enforcement that help do that. So that's a great thing to do.
Lisa, I have a question. This is Carol in Bloomington. In a couple of the slides, you mentioned safeguarding the contact information of congregation members.
Yes.
And we have an online database that we use, and we do provide access to members for their own information, and they can also get information for the members of the congregation, just their name, address, and phone number. And I'm getting ready to publish a paper copy of this in a few days, and I'm realizing that we do include some folks who have been visiting for a while but have not yet made either a financial or membership commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if I should maybe be more discerning about who to include there.
Well, and that's a really good question. And part of it is looking at much of the information that are in our directories are available through many websites already. There's yellow pages, white pages, all these online sites where you can just Google someone or search with some other tool and find them. So that addresses and phone numbers are often not there. Where it becomes questionable is whether or not to include children's names and ages. One of the things that we strongly recommend is that in no newsletter or websites do you ever identify children by last name. And so you need to be careful about how you also safeguard that information. Now, because we know that churches are one place that people can go to try to learn more about about how to access young people. So you might want to think about whether or not to include that material in a printed copy that is available to non-members. And you might want to think about, do you want to restrict the online access to people who have actually made a personal commitment to being part of your community? And you might want to think about, do you have the directories just out for anyone to pick up, including rental people or people do just drop in, or do you have it in a way that they're available, but perhaps at a membership table that's staffed, so you actually have to have eye-to-eye contact with the person and can sort of, oh gosh, I'm sorry, we ran out today if there's something that just doesn't feel right.
Okay, thanks.
Again, it's about, that being Anderson. Curious, not being paranoid. Pardon? Any other questions, suggestions, comments?
Well, this is Clyde Anderson in Omaha, and one thing that we have at our exits, we have close-up instructions, about how to lock the doors and so forth. But next to that, and then plus in our furnace rooms and several other risk areas, we have a 8.5 by 11 instruction sheet on various types. We call it emergency contacts, and we list all the different, like if you smell gas, what to do, if water is leaking, and we have kind of in different tiers, but particularly things that require a 911 response, or urgent response, as opposed to other things that they can just call the building and grounds chair or something.
Right, a stopped-up toilet is different than the smell of gas. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thanks.
This is Amy.
Lisa, this is Judy in Bloomington. I'd like to suggest that for the first aid kit, people make a list on the outside of the kit to say what the content should be, so that when it's checked, you've got something to check it against. And especially, you mentioned expiration dates, but to be especially careful if you have the EpiPen, that has such a short expiration date, to be very careful in checking that frequently.
That's great. And is it Annie, you keep on trying to jump in and then someone else comes in?
Yeah, this is Amy from Flint. And related to the EpiPen note, I had a question for anybody on allergy policies. I know that personally, because I have a daughter who's nut allergic, but I also know that the rate of nut allergies has increased a lot over the last 10 years. And I was curious if there were any congregations who were going nut-free or latex-free, or at least allergy-friendly and aware. And I know in Michigan you can't keep an EpiPen on site unless there's a prescription for it. But I'm wondering what others' experiences are with that, and if anybody has any policies that they could share.
We do. We have. This is Christy Lee from Elliott Chapel in St. Louis. We are a nut-free building. We have. We share our RE building is nut-free. We have. We share our space with the nursery school. And so with the number of increasing allergies, we do have it nut-free completely.
So, and that's a great question too, Amy, because just Church Mutual, again, they send out a newsletter on a regular basis about issues that they are finding that congregations are coming up with. And the one that I think was just out this week, I'm just seeing if I can find it on my computer. They have done one on electronic communications. They have guidelines for that. But they also have managing your risks, food allergies impact children and youth ministries. And so they have an article that just came out Monday last week, all on this stuff. And so you might want to go on, again, Church Mutual's website, has information, and you can get on their free newsletter kind of thing that helps you think about how to do this. This one also has protecting outdoor equipment and structures, and how to prevent damages or liability when renting out your facility. So the risk reporter from Church Mutual can give you a lot of tidbits on how to deal with this as well.
Thank you.
This is Clyde in Omaha, and I think we, along with other churches, have a large community garden, and that we welcome non-members to have plots there. And one of the things we were concerned about is liability with use of garden chemicals. So we've just prohibited the use of any garden chemicals unless they're approved for organic use in our community garden. I'm just wondering if people have had any other issues with community gardens from a safety standpoint.
I don't know of any, but I think it's pardon? Was there someone who had experience with that? So I was going to say, I don't know of any, but what I would do is I would say you might want to put in a call to your insurance company and ask them what they would find helpful or what they would think is a good idea for you to protect, to both be outward focused as well as making sure that you're protecting yourselves as well.
We have not done the community garden issue, but I myself have environmental chemical allergies, and since I have been at this church, we have created a chemical-free zone in the sanctuary so people without perfumes can sit in a certain section. We have gone from live Christmas trees and live greens to artificial ones. We no longer use certain plants at Easter, and it turns out I might have brought it to people's attention, but it turns out there were already a lot of people in the congregation that were allergic and were just afraid to say anything. And people knew I had an issue because I wear a mask all the time. And so they would ask me about it. And so I didn't expect them to change for me, but they did. And in the process, they were helping many other people that actually had problems but were always afraid to say anything. So there's a lot of indoor environmental issues, cleaners, aftershaves, perfumes, all kinds of things like that. We don't even use live candles. We try to use the battery-powered ones too.
Right. So, it's sort of like when I came to one particular church as their minister, they complained that they hadn't had to make tea before, because nobody drank tea, and within 3 weeks of my asking for tea, they were going through 2 and 3 pots a week because there were tea drinkers who just never felt they could ask. So yes, that kind of stuff. But again, that's the websites also, like the Church Mutual has a lot of this kind of information on there, and it's a good thing to look at and figure out how to help yourselves be smart for your own liability, but also make your congregations more welcoming. Some will have a fragrance-free zone on Sunday mornings in their sanctuary and things like that as well too. So that's always things to think about. Anyone else? Great. Well, and I don't want to sound like a commercial for Church Mutual. Everything I've mentioned to you is available free on their website. Although they are the main insurer of many UU congregations, all the materials, they view it as their privilege and responsibility to make sure that these resources are available for free to all sorts of other people. So I want to thank you all for participating tonight, and let me end with the same words that I began with, because hopefully by now you will have realized that although there's a lot that can be done for safety to help our congregations out, there are many things that we can do that don't take that much work or that we can do easily in collaboration. So again, from Wayne Arneson, take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. So thank you for attending this evening and for all the good work that you do for your congregations to help make Unitarian Universalism more bright in your neck of the woods.